It's like, have you ever heard of the Wired auto-complete interviews where they take Google and they take the celebrity's name and be like, is Brie Larson? And then, it gives you the autofill options. Yeah, sure. So she did one of those, and she comes across like just the most dismissive, nasty, snarky person.
Is that like a personal attack or something? Or
Is Brie Larson left-handed?
Why do you need to know? I'm actually right-handed, kind of ambidextrous, and I can't believe you even have to Google that. Duh. I mean, why?
And it comes across in her performance a little, and I don't know why. Like,
sometimes she's bratty, sometimes she's a Tony Stark kind of smart alecky, wiseacre that's cracking jokes.
Congratulations, Agent Fury. You have finally asked a relevant question.
Oh, congratulations to you, Star Force lady.
Sometimes she's a confused alien. Sometimes she's stoic.
I mean, I got a lot of the Guardians of the Galaxy vibe, not because of the soundtrack, but a little bit in her character too. Like,
well, that's what they were going for.
Yeah, going for.
That's the weird thing about this movie. It's all the usual kind of Marvel hallmarks are in place, but it never really gets off the ground, at least in my opinion. A lot of it because of her performance, whereas I don't know what her character is, really. She can't remember her past, but early on, the bad guys tap her brain, so we see her past. So then we have to spend half the movie with her trying to remember her past, but we already know, so there's no mystery or tension, which is a problem.
I think we should talk about the elephant in the room, and that's like the controversy, quote unquote, surrounding this movie and Brie Larson's comments at some kind of women in film event, and she got a big old case of foot and mouth syndrome. Well, her comments essentially were, the first thing I saw was a black woman was interviewing her, and she says, how important is women in film?
What does it mean to be a woman in film?
It means it's really hard.
I remember reading when Captain Marvel was about to come out, or even in production, early stages of it. Brie Larson cast as Captain Marvel, right? And it was a finally moment. The Marvel franchise of 37 movies finally has its first female lead.
Yeah.
But she's white. And so there was that kind of like, it deflated everybody. And there is a school of thinking within feminism that if you are a white woman, you can't be a true feminist because you are not doubly oppressed. All I know is that she's white lady, and not quite there.
Well, the funny thing about that interview clip is it's a black woman interviewing her, and then Brie Larson's like, it's hard for women in the industry, especially black women.
And if you're a woman of color, then it's really, really hard.
It's like, flip that microphone around. Let the black woman talk about that. Like, is that race-splaining? Could we call it that? I don't know.
Perhaps, Jay, if you're going to get down in the muck. Then you have this like kind of awkward moment, where it's like, we didn't get 100% of what we wanted. And I feel a little like then Brie Larson had the spotlight on her. Therefore, she starts to do a little virtue signaling. And then she turns on the white guys to show that she is down with the struggle of feminism.
Only 2.5% of those top critics were women of color.
This blonde white woman from Southern California.
Sure. And then it turns into like this rant about film critics.
That 67% of the top critics reviewing the 100 highest grossing movies in 2017 were white males.
Film critics being mostly white men, right? And then she broke down the statistics, right? And then she's like, I don't care what a 40-year-old white guy has to say about a
white dude.
She
had to make it sound more condescending.
Yeah. I don't care what a 40-year-old white dude has to say about A Wrinkle in Time, because that movie wasn't made for him.
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him. I want to know what that film meant to women of color, to biracial women, to teen women of color, to teens.
I'm sure there's lots of white male critics that have watched movies that, quote, weren't made for them and said that they were great films.
Well, I think the kernel of what she was probably trying to say is a positive thing. But I think the way she expressed it was like the worst possible way.
Sure.
I watched a documentary recently called Horror Noir. It's only streaming on Shudder. We're not sponsored by Shudder, but it's a horror streaming service. It's a documentary about the history of African American representation in horror, kind of framed from like Night of the Living Dead to Get Out. And so it's all interviewing, black filmmakers, black actors. And there's one part, it's a really good documentary, but there's one part in particular where they're talking about the movie Candyman, which is one of my favorite horror movies of the 90s. And they bring up things about Candyman that I never would have thought of because they come from, a different life experience, different background, different history. And I was like, that's great. Like, they've made me look at this movie in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. So more voices is a good thing. Mm-hmm. That's all she had to say. But by like making it this weird, condescending, snarky, like, I don't need to listen to white dudes, it just comes across so bizarre.
Different movies speak to different people of different races, ages, genders, but she's making it out, at least from what I saw, that there needs to be more diversity in film criticism.
Which is such a small, like...
It's the least important thing in the whole wide world. You know what I mean?
And we're saying that as people that review movies, but it's very, very true.
In terms of social justice,
yes,
it is the least important thing. Film criticism.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the other thing to point out too, is that what we're talking about, movies like A Wrinkle in Time, like I know that was based on a book, but like Captain Marvel, the Star Wars movies, like these are big generic entertainment. We're not talking about Moonlight.
I was just going to use that as an example.
Or like Tangerine, which is a movie from a few years ago that I really loved, that was about African American trans prostitutes, and it's a fantastic movie.
Yes.
But
and what are their review scores, Jay? A movie about a black transgendered prostitute doesn't speak to a 40-year-old white man, but I could bet you dollars to donuts a whole bunch of 40-year-old white men gave that movie a good review. Her logic was comparing the demographics of film critics to the demographics of the population.
This is a huge disconnect from the US population breakdown of 30% white men, 30% white women, 20% men of color, and 20% women of color.
Final note on this, diversity, good. White dudes, bad.
Well, that's the thing, is like she made those comments and it blew up, and then you have the angry internet nerds that like have dwelled on it since. Like I heard those comments as like, wow, she sounds like a dingbat, and then I moved on. But then you have these, like, there are people that do like YouTube videos every day complaining about Brie Larson, like she's just another Hollywood actor. So it's like, it's just like everybody's just lost their mind.
It does feel that way a little bit, because you're taking a struggle, a legitimate struggle in many arenas, in many jobs and professions, and you're kind of like pushing it into other areas where...
Well, she's pushing it into something that she knows.
A good review can change your life. It changed mine.
And that's like she was one of the people that was pushing for the kind of crowdfunding to pay for underprivileged little girls to go see Captain Marvel. This is the least important movie that's ever been made in the history of cinema. This is empowering if you have superhuman abilities and can fly into space.
Captain Marvel only has power because she stood too close to an engine that exploded in her face, not because of feminism.
Yeah.
And so it's essentially a very bad message.
Other people besides white dudes like Star Wars and would love the opportunity to do a set visit.
Did you enjoy playing such a strong, heroic female character, and if so, why?
Please welcome Callie Marie Tran, also known as Rose Tico.
So I'm doing the rest of the cast today as well, and of course there's going to be some Star Wars fanboys that know everything about these films.
Like, one of the most pleasurable things to sit there yesterday at the Skywalker Ranch and see you come on screen in your character.
Thank you so much.
Of General Hux, what's his relationship going into The Last Jedi with Kylo Ren?
Is it really hard to kind of like be in this movie and not say anything? I mean, you're walking a really thin line here.
First of all, congrats, you're in a Star Wars movie. This is insane.
Right,
Has the
so
novelty
great.
worn off yet?
No,
No, good.
it's amazing. We're in Star Wars.
Yeah,
In Star
we're in
Wars.
Star Wars.
Hi, can you tell me a little bit about the movie? About your character in the movie?
I can tell you a lot about my character in the movie.
You say, I only know one truth. It's time for the Jedi to end.
And I'm also saying I don't hate white dudes. I'm just saying we need to be conscious of our bias and do our part to make sure that everyone is in the room.
There's a very easy way to say more diverse voice when it comes to criticism, film criticism, art criticism is a great thing because then you get more perspectives and more point of view.
Say,
I just said it.
Underrepresented people, women, go out and become film critics because we need those voices too. I'm Brie Larson, and that's my statement. And then she walks backwards out of the room, right?
I squeeze, yeah, I squeeze, yeah, I squeeze, yeah, I squeeze, yeah, I squeeze, yeah.